Welcome to our latest webcast. Thank you for your patience. We've dedicated this to how to survive a summer in Italy, and I should dedicate it to how to survive a webcast broadcast. I'm Elizabeth Heath. Liz, I run Villaggio Tours, and we do small group, slow travel trips from my home base in Umbria, where I've lived for 17 years.
And I'm Laura Itzkowitz. I am a freelance journalist and I write the New Roman Times on Substack. I am based in Rome, which means I cover Italy the way someone who actually lives here does. The good, the bad, the complicated, and the things nobody puts in the guidebooks, which I should know because I also update guidebooks.
Right. As do I, and we both know that there's some things that we don't include in the guidebooks. A lot of times, not because we're trying to cover anything up, but because we don't have room to go into as much detail as we'd like to be able to. So these webcasts are nice for that as well. So between the two of us, we have a lot of years of navigating Italy, and today we want to talk specifically about summer because it's its own special breed of animal, particularly if you're talking about July or August, planning a trip for July or August. So there's some things that are worth knowing before you hit the ground.
Yeah, and we're not here to talk you out of it, quite the opposite, but we do want to make sure you're going in with your eyes open. And that means we can't not mention what's happening right now. There is a serious heat wave gripping much of Europe at this moment, and it's not something to take lightly. This is the kind of heat that requires real planning and precautions.
Right. And interestingly, it's bearing down harder in Central Europe. France, in particular, is having a really terrible stretch. And a lot of these places, as we know in Italy too, weren't built for air conditioning. They still haven't retrofitted for air conditioning. So people really are suffering. Italy's not getting off the hook either. It's been quite uncomfortable and potentially dangerous levels of heat lately, which is another good reason to go over some things that we want to talk about today. So, Laura, moving right along, every summer we hear from people who come back from Italy with some version of nobody told me it was going to be that bad or it was going to be like that when they're referring to the summertime. The heat, the lines, the crowds. I was just in Europe with a group I led there. Laura, I was just in Europe. I was just in Rome with a group I led there. Laura, you live in Rome. And we have to be honest with you up front. It really is that bad.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not an exaggeration. Summers in Italy can be brutal, especially in cities. The sun is relentless, major sites are packed, and standing in line for the Colosseum or Pantheon at noon will lead you to question all of your life choices up to this point. That is just the reality.
I can vouch for that because I was standing in the Coliseum at noon on Sunday questioning why I ever dreamed of getting into this line of work. But that said, people come to Italy all the time in the summertime and every year, and they have wonderful vacations. And that's many times that's because summer's the times that people can take their vacations, right? School's out. That's when they have time off. So we're not here to dissuade you from visiting in the summertime. If that's the only time, with the caveat, if that's the only time you can visit. But we're here to make sure you know how to handle it a little bit better.
Yeah, so that's what today is really about, practical strategies. We'll talk about how to plan your time in the cities, what to know about August specifically, and then we want to spend some time on the beach because the Italian beach is its own world and it comes with its own set of unwritten rules that nobody explains to you, but it can also be one of the most rewarding experiences of your trip to Italy in the summer.
Right. This is a not an Italian beach, but this is Sardinia in the summer behind me. Just to, because sadly I am not currently there, but just to give you an idea of how magnificent it can be. And interestingly, Laura and I have very different approaches on how to do the beach. So we'll get into that.
Yeah, we definitely do, but we will come back to that later. So now let's start with the cities. So,
Okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
yes. Okay, so the first thing that I tell everyone is to rethink your relationship with the middle of the day, right? The Italian summer schedule exists for a reason. nobody with any sense is standing in a queue at the Colosseum at noon in August.
They're standing inside the Coliseum at noon in August or June. It was when that's where I was on Sunday. Nobody with any sense who grew up here anyway, and who knows how the summers can be and how much worse they've gotten actually in the last dozen or so years. But visitors do it constantly, and I understand why. And that's because they've flown across the ocean. They want to see everything. They want to make the most of all of the time that they have. So taking a break in the afternoon, which we strongly advocate for, sort of feels like you're wasting time. But it really becomes a question of self-preservation too.
Yeah, so my top tip is to plan your sightseeing either for the early morning or early evening. And I mean early, like 8 a.m., which is when most of the major sites open. The light is better for photos, it's cooler, and hopefully you're not sharing the Sistine Chapel with 600 other people at that hour. And in the evening, I would say definitely check to see if the monuments and museums you want to visit have late opening hours, because the Colosseum, for example, typically offers evening tours in the summer. And I've done that with a friend who was visiting, and it was fantastic. And on a trip to Florence in July, a couple of years ago, I saw that the Uffizi was open until 10 p.m. on Tuesdays. So I went to the museum at like 7 p.m. when, everyone else was heading off for their aperitivo or getting ready for dinner. And I had that museum almost all to myself.
Yeah, 3 hours in an uncrowded Uffizi is pretty. You can get a lot out of that. The major sites, I think every major site anymore requires timed entry. So you have to book those in advance, obviously. I mean, we could do a whole other webcast about how to book timed entry, and that may be something that we need to look at in the future because it's not as easy as it looks. But you do want to book the earliest slot available, or maybe a late afternoon entry. But if you go early in the morning, by lunchtime, you've had your big cultural experience. You can feel like you've done something solid with your day, and then you can take some time to, by lunchtime, take some time to cool off, get something to eat, have a nice long lunch, head back to your hotel for a shower, which you will desperately need, and then take a nice rest. Which to me is like the perfect way to spend an summer afternoon in Rome.
Yeah, exactly. And then the aperitivo hour comes to save the late afternoon and evening. So, as Liz said, spend the middle of the day somewhere cool, a museum with good air conditioning, back at your hotel, or having a long lunch, preferably somewhere dark and quiet. And then around 6 or 7, when the heat starts to ease off, that's when the city starts to come alive again anyway. I mean, that's when the Romans come out. And in the summer, there are often evening events like outdoor movies or concerts.
Right. And that's a real, like, once you adjust to that rhythm, which is so different, I think, from just the whole way I speak mostly to a US audience, but so different from the way we're used to sort of operating in the US. But once you adjust to the way that it's when in Rome or when in Italy, do as the Italians, it's really quite lovely because you're not rushing through everything, and you're living at the pace that the place was sort of designed for.
Yeah, and another thing that makes a really big difference is just simply choosing differently and trying to get a little bit off the beaten path. I mean, Rome has more than 900 churches, and almost all of them are free, uncrowded, and full of extraordinary art. Plus, the churches are always cooler than it is outside. So if you've been, walking around the center of Rome or Florence or whatever, and you're tired and hot, you need to just sit down and rest, pop into a church, and you can sit in a pew for as long as you need, and it won't cost you a dime.
Right. It must be those cavernous ceilings that keep them that cool. Thick walls and cavernous ceilings. There are also loads of smaller museums too that really hold some real treasures. The Roman National Museums, including the Palazzo Massimo, the Baths of Diocletian, Palazzo Altemps. These are filled with ancient sculptures, mosaics, frescoes. And what they're not filled with is people. Galleria Doria Pamphili, I know, Laura, is one that you and I both love. It's an exquisite private collection inside an equally exquisite palace, and it's practically hidden in plain sight on Via del Corso in Rome. So that's all to say, if you can allow yourself to forego the Vatican museums, there's still no shortage of stunning art and antiquities and museums all over Rome. Again, we're talking mostly about Rome, but in places all over Italy. And you often are seeing the artwork in much more intimate surroundings, like it's just you and that statue or something. And it can be quite meaningful.
Yeah, and aside from that, I mean, there are whole neighborhoods of Rome where tourists rarely go. So if you want to get away from the crowds, go spend some time in Pignato, Ostiense, even the Aventine Hill, and you will get the feeling that you found something that isn't on, every Instagram or travel account. Just go where the visitor maps stop. Go a little bit past the Centro Storico.
Past the borders of the maps in our guidebooks, right? And granted, Rome is easier than some other destinations because it's a more spread out city. Florence, for example, always feels much more congested and compact, and so many of the must-see things are right in a concentrated area. But even there, if you go over to the Oltrarno neighborhood, or what's south of the Arno to the Brancacci Chapel, the Bardini Garden, there's always a less trodden path if you're willing to seek it out. Usually involves walking in the opposite direction of the crowds. But depending on your schedule, that could mean skipping some of the, quote, must-see sites in favor of smaller venues. And we have to talk about August specifically, because that's when we talk about whole other animals. Then there's August. And it catches a lot of visitors off guard, and that is Ferragosto. And Laura, I consider you a Ferragosto expert, so why don't you take it? Tell them what it is.
Okay, so Ferragosto is August 15th. It's a national holiday, and it marks the peak of what Italians call the ferie, so the summer holiday period. And traditionally, this is when Italians go to the beach, the mountains, or maybe back to the village where their family is from. So in cities like Rome, Florence, Venice, businesses close, like entire offices close.
Yeah.
Shops and restaurants close. You will be walking around the city and see sign after sign on the doors that just say "Chiuso per ferie," so closed for vacation, and that's it. Sometimes they might be closed for a week. Sometimes they might be closed for the whole month.
And the sign might not say when they're reopening, right? It'll just say closed for ferie. My husband is in construction, and we always tell foreigners, the Italians know this, but we always tell when he has clients, foreign clients, we always tell them, like, don't expect your tile to arrive in August, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Don't expect the guy to come install your doors in August, because nothing happens in August. And there's just it's almost like a black hole in the calendar. As far as the work world is, the beach world's another story. But in any case, if you're visiting a city in August and you have your heart set, particularly on a certain restaurant, you should check before you go, because you can't assume that it's going to be open.
Yeah, for sure. Though I have to say I have my own opinion about August, and it is probably quite counterintuitive, but I have actually grown to love August in Rome. I think it's one of my favorite times to be here, and I know that sounds really strange, but the city empties out because the Romans all leave, and the traffic disappears with them. So, my husband drives around this city all the time, and it's constantly circling around looking for parking, except in August, he can always find parking. We can walk through the Centro Storico, and it feels completely different, quieter, more spacious. And the light in Rome in August is just extraordinary.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's sort of it does have a different atmosphere. I know, having been there in August as well. But it's not just the cities where things shift in August. In Umbria, I'm you're talking about people going back to their home village. Like they come back to where I am because we do have a lot of people who come to Alarona just for the Ferragosto period. So this is when the villages, these small towns, have their sagre or local food festivals. They have outdoor events in the piazza and just people out and about more than we see it any other time of year. So for us too, it's a nice time to be in a small town like this. And I think visitors would find it a nice time to be off the tourist path as well.
Yeah, and this is a good time to mention that cities aren't the only option in summer. I mean, if the heat and the crowds of Rome and Florence feel like too much, there's a reason that Italians head for the sea or the mountains. The Dolomites, the Apennines, the lakes, the altitude makes a huge difference. And these places are spectacular in summer, but many international visitors don't even think to put them on their bucket list.
Right. Or if they do, I mean, it's just like, oh, I'm going to see Lake Como for a day or something before I go somewhere else. That's like, no, you go to Lake Como for a week, right?
Mhm.
You go there and you park there and you stay. And I'm a fan of the summer Dolomites is my happy place. And definitely it's a place to put on your list for a future trip because it's so different and culturally it's so very different from much of the rest of Italy. But it's cooler, it's quieter in these little valley towns. There's great and varied hiking for every skill level, every fitness level, I should say. And the scenery is just extraordinary. It's not going to solve I have to see Rome and I only have August to do it problem, but it's worth knowing that these alternatives exist.
Yeah. So for August, definitely check what's open, book ahead where you can, and have a backup plan for lunch. But don't let Ferragosto scare you out of August entirely.
Backup plan for lunch. That's important. Yeah. You should always have a backup plan for lunch. So
Yeah. Yeah.
what's next?
Okay, Liz, we have to talk about flip-flops.
Oh my God, I hate flip flops so much. I am prepared. We have to talk about flip flops because this is a hill I am prepared to die on. I am wearing a pair of flip flops as we speak, though. However, I am in my house and not going out in public in flip flops. They are the wrong shoes for Italian streets, and there's no debate here. The streets are dirty, they're dusty, the pavement's uneven, and you really need. We are moving into our what to pack section, by the way. If we hadn't, if that segue wasn't clear, you want a sandal that has like some real sole under it, like a Teva or a Skechers sandal, or something that puts some space between the street and your feet. And flip flops do not do that. And they also just kind of look sloppy and your feet get dirty within about 20 minutes. And Italy's just not the place to be wandering around with dirty feet. I was talking to, I'll just little aside. I had a conversation on a flight home from the US with a young woman who was going to Italy for the first time, and her friends were seated elsewhere on the plane. And she's like, oh, what should I was like, well, you just want to dress a little bit differently, wear nicer shoes, something like that. And then when I saw her at baggage claim with her three friends, they all had these like flat flip flop for their feet were practically touching the ground. I was like, oh God, I can't stand it. Anyway, that's my flip flop rant.
Well, I mean, really a good
I
sandal.
feel very strongly about this.
A good sandal with some structure is really all you need. I mean, you don't have to sacrifice style for comfort. There are beautiful options, just not flip flops unless you're at the beach.
Exactly.
Okay. And for clothing in general, linen. I live in linen all summer long in Italy, but any fabric that breathes. I mean, if you're planning on wearing, tank tops or have bare shoulders, bare back, whatever during the day, understandable. It's hot. But if you plan to visit any churches, be sure to keep a light wrap or scarf in your bag because you will need it anytime you go into a church. You have to cover your shoulders. And that includes St. Peter's, obviously, and the Vatican. I mean, the museums are one thing, but if you want to enter the Sistine Chapel, you're going to need to cover your shoulders. Bare
Right.
arms and bare backs are not going to get you through the door.
Yep. I saw people get turned away just this past few days when I was there. And actually these rules apply for men too. So it's not just women who are, for whom the dress code applies. So knee length is fine almost anywhere, but short shorts will get men turned away at churches, or you'll see a man walking around with some diaphanous flowery scarf wrapped around him. And that's why, because his shorts are too short. So it's worth knowing before you spend your time waiting to get into St. Peter's or even into the Sistine Chapel or something, and then live to regret your wardrobe choices. The analogy my friend Rebecca always uses that I really like is that when you're in Italy, as a, whether you live here, tourist, whatever, dress like you're going to brunch. And that doesn't mean that you have to dress fancy. You just don't look sloppy. And you look pulled together, you're covered, you have a backup, the little scarf in your bag or something. If you're going to duck into a church, if you got bare shoulders, it's not that difficult of a formula, really.
Yeah. And honestly, if you're in Rome in the summer, June, July, August, don't worry too much about having an extra layer for the evenings, because it's not cooling off in any meaningful way after dark. Mm-hmm. I mean, keep a light wrap for the churches, or if you tend to run cold, maybe you're going into air-conditioned places, that's fine. But other than that, don't worry too much about bringing extra jackets or sweaters.
Yeah, it just cools off to tolerable in the evening, not too chilly, right? So we said we were going to talk about the beach. And I think the first thing to say that is that going to the Italian beach is not like going to the beach the way most Americans picture when they think about going to the beach.
Right. It's a whole system. And now that I know how it works, it's one of my favorite things about Italy. And I did not grow up a beach person. My family never went to the beach when I was growing up. I became a beach person in Italy, and you can too. You just need to know what to expect.
Right. It is an entire culture around beach going. And if nobody explains it to you, you can end up in some awkward situations like I did from the first time I tried to go to the beach in Italy.
Okay, Liz, you've got to tell us about this.
There's no ex-boyfriend involved. Okay. But this was years ago. I think it was my second trip to Italy, and friends and I we went to the beach in Ravenna, and we got there, and there were the long, neat rows of chairs that we knew were paid, the paid areas, the umbrellas and loungers. And in the front of these rows, there was a fairly wide strip of just unoccupied beach. So we plopped our towels down there and spread out, and thought we were just fine. And, this was a good place to be, right? We didn't understand why no one else was there.
I can already see where this is going.
I know. So probably within a couple minutes, just when we got comfortable, this man came over and shoot us off. And we didn't understand. I mean, we understood, but we didn't speak Italian at the time. But he was basically that walkway in front, the area in front of the beach club is it's supposed to be left open, both for people to walk past, but also for the beach club members to have this sort of unencumbered access to the beach, I guess. So you can't set up there. So then we went and sat down in the front row of loungers. We found found a couple of loungers there, and figured that, well, I know you're shaking your head. I didn't know. Figured that someone would come along and take our money, right? Well, we were willing to pay.
But of course, nobody comes.
No. Eventually, the guy came over and shooed us off of there because we were in somebody else's chairs, because little did we know people had reserved those beach loungers for the day, maybe for the week or the season or whatever, and they just hadn't shown up yet for the day. So impatient man, by this time he was impatient, shoot us off, and that's how I learned about what the stabilimento balneare are. Balneare.
Yes, so let's explain what we are actually talking about here. The Italian coastline is divided, legally divided, between concessions run as beach clubs, which are usually referred to as Stabilimento Balneare, or sometimes Lido, or even Bagno in Tuscany, for example. And the public beaches, which are called the Spiaggia Libera. And the mix varies depending on where you are.
So at the stabilimento, I always feel like that's one of those words I always feel like I mispronounce. You pay for your spot. You rent a sun lounger, an umbrella. You usually have to buy two, because they're two loungers with an umbrella between them. And the price can vary enormously depending on where you are. Amalfi Coast is going to cost more than Rimini, depending on where you are in the season too. Beginning and end of the summer the prices might be lower. How far you book in advance, and then that spot is yours for the day. So people do really camp out for the day too.
Yes, definitely. So yes, these are paid. You basically pay for your entry to the beach club for the day. But what you get in return is real. I mean, most beach clubs have changing rooms, showers. There's almost always a bar and sometimes a restaurant, which some of them are really quite good. The beach is maintained, the water is watched by a lifeguard. There are bathrooms, for families especially, it's incredibly convenient. I personally love Italian beach clubs, and I don't go to the fancy ones. I usually go to the ones that Italians actually go to. And I just think they're great because you don't need to worry about, schlepping all of your gear, like the umbrella, chairs, etc. Like, all you have to bring is a towel to lay out on the lounge chair set up at the beach club. And, you bring your own sunblock and that's it. So I just love arriving in the morning and settling into the lounger with a magazine or a book, taking cooling dips in the Mediterranean, having that nice long lunch at the restaurant, and perhaps a nap under the umbrella in the afternoon.
Yeah, I know. You're not wrong that there's a lot to be said for the beach clubs, for the stabilimento. I myself am a Spiaggia Libera gal, and I think that probably comes from growing up in Florida, where we had these wide public beaches and you just always had room to spread out. So, and I think I still resent that experience in Ravenna, these many years ago, being rejected there. So I like to come with my own umbrella, towel. We find our spot. I say I, like I'm doing this by myself, but it's always like family or group or something. And if you're near a beach club, you can still go to the beach club, buy a spritz or a coffee, use their bathroom, get a gelato. So it's not like you're on a desert island with no services nearby. But the difference between Florida beaches and Italian beaches is that the free beaches at Spiagge Liberi are often quite small spaces wedged between several beach clubs. So if you're with all the cheapy people like me, you can easily find yourself, like I've been in places that are so tight that like you're touching towels with a stranger, which again is not sort of my memory of beaches in Florida, but you have that beautiful Mediterranean to jump into too. So
unless you go to the more wild beaches, right? And that's another thing to keep in mind. Not every free beach has a stabilimento nearby. I mean, there are more remote stretches of coast. Sometimes there are beaches within national parks, for example, and you might genuinely be on your own, like no bar, no bathrooms, no shade, nothing.
Make it sound so awful. But I mean, that's why a lot of people go to these sort of wild beaches, because they don't want to be around a lot of people. Maybe with any luck, one of those bar boats will come by, because that's a great thing that Italy has too. That's just like a boat that sells Aperol spritz. I mean,
the gelato boat.
Yeah, or gelato boat. But but you have to be organized to do an Italian beach that way, because if you need a bathroom or you need something to eat, it means like packing up, getting in the car, going and finding it, or just going without. So all that said, the Italian beach process is its own, like, how do you do the beach in Italy? Laura, you're the beach person here more than I am.
Okay, so first of all, figure out what you're dealing with, right? The experience that you want to have. If you are planning to go to a stabilimento, look for the entrance. There's usually a gate or like a kind of beach shack where you check in or pay. Don't just walk in and sit down, though, even if the chairs look empty, you have to first stop and pay.
Now I know. Now I know.
And now some beach clubs allow you to book online in advance. If not, it's a good idea to call, especially in high season, which is what I usually do. But if the beach club has enabled online booking, you go online, pick your row, your umbrella number, you pay in advance with a credit card, and you just show up and, find. I mean, I usually still like check in with somebody and they'll show me to the right place.
Right. Make sure you're at the right place. Right.
Exactly.
And then on a Spiaggia Libra, you just walk up, find a free patch of sand and hope for the best. And you can always spot the Spiaggia Libra because the beach clubs are these neat rows of umbrellas that are all the same color. And the Spiaggia Libra is like this patchwork quilt of different umbrellas, and people have like strung up, their beach covers up over like sticks of driftwood and stuff. So it's a free beach in every sense of the word. So you can either bring your own umbrella or hope that there is some shade and pop under a tree or something.
Yeah. And if you want to eat at the beach club's restaurant, then you should also book a table in advance. And that might just be, the same phone call, right? Like I'll call up ahead and say, can I book 2 lounge chairs and umbrella and have a table at the restaurant for lunch. And if you don't want to like sit down for a whole meal, then you can usually get sandwiches or salads like at the bar. Sometimes we even bring sandwiches from home, and that's generally fine even if you are at a beach club. And then just remember that parking is its own adventure. So the popular Italian beaches tend to have paid parking nearby, but those lots can fill up fast. So the earlier you go, the better. And alternatively, there are beach towns that are easily reachable by train. So from Rome, for example, you can just hop on a regional train to Santa Marinella or Santa Severa and walk right to the beach from the train station. On islands like Capri and Ischia, you can take the bus or a taxi to the beach.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And at all of I guess on the beach clubs always have the flags posted too, or I guess the free beaches too. Many of the free beaches do too. So those are the flags. It's a standard international flag system to denote water safety. So green means, and not by water safety, I mean like the currents and things, or how much wind. So green means safe swimming, yellow means caution, red means no swimming, and they take it seriously. The red flag is serious because the seas here can look calm, but there could be an invisible undertow that's quite dangerous.
And aside from beach clubs, another great way to spend a day is on a boat. And it really doesn't have to be prohibitively expensive either. I mean, you see these like people on these very glamorous boats on, the Amalfi Coast and Lake Como. You're like, oh, I don't, that seems like some of them are very expensive, but it doesn't have to be. Last summer in Ischia, for example, my husband and I did an all-day boat tour around the island for 60 euros per person, and that included a full multi-course lunch with wine, bruschetta, and pasta that they cooked on the boat, and it was amazing.
How many people were on there with you? Do you remember?
There were about 20 people on that boat. So
that's not bad.
Yeah, I thought it was really fun. I mean, it's not like, one of those massive. There are also really large boats in some places where you like are with hundreds of people, but like this was 20 people all hanging out on the boat, eating pasta on the boat, and like starting to swim in little coves.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me is like a really quintessential Italian.
Back here, Sardinia. That was
Mhm.
from a boat right before I jumped into that water. Yeah, there is something really restorative about doing the beach the Italian way, and whether that's at a Stabilimento, the Laura way, or the Spiaggia Libera, the Liz way. Either way, it's not a quick stop. It's a full day. You bring food or you eat something at the beach bar, and you're just like, your day is the beach. And it's relaxation. And then in the case of Italian vacations, a week or 2 weeks, you're doing the same thing like almost every day, right? Just going to the beach and checking out, disconnecting. Probably something we could all stand to do a little bit more of.
Yeah. So to bring it back to where we started, summer really is not the easiest time to visit, but it is definitely not the disaster that some people make it out to be either. You just need to go in with a bit of information, a bit of flexibility, and maybe spend some time at the beach like we
I
do.
think so, yeah. I think you got to jump in that water, man. That's just the best part of the Italian summer is that right back there behind me. So book early for the big sites, move at the Italian pace, which is early morning for monuments, resting through the midday heat, coming out again and having a wonderful, summer evening in a city. Remember that Ferragosto means lots of things are closed. And please remember to wear sensible sandals.
Yes. Sensible, stylish shoes for the win.
Okay. And just briefly before we go, on the trains down and back from Rome, I see what I always see when I travel in Italy, which is people struggling with gigantic suitcases that are too heavy for them to carry, much less lift onto the train. And they're filled with more things than they're ever going to need for their trip. So I decided to devote our next webcast to packing sensibly for Italy. Laura, I know you're not certain whether you're going to be able to join us or not because you're going to be there in Sardinia, from what I understand. So the date right now is TBD because I want to get some feedback from viewers as to what the best time might be for them too. But it'll be in about a month from now. I'll be sending out invitations and announcements about this, and I hope to see you and your medium-sized suitcase on our next webcast in July. In the meantime, have a great summer, and apologies again for the technological delays at our beginning. Okay.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks, everyone.